So I saw The Matrix Resurrections, directed by Lana Wachowski, and the film stars Keanu Reeves and Carrie-Anne Moss and Jessica Henwick. And to give you a brief synopsis, Keanu Reeves, who plays Thomas Anderson or Neo, is stuck back in the Matrix after the events of the Matrix Revolutions. He has memories and dreams about what happened in those movies and about Trinity, but he cannot fully use his oneness to do all the things he did before. He needs to be red pilled again, and it's up to Bugs, who's played by Jessica Henwick, and Morpheus, who's played by Yahya Abdul Mateen II, to wake him back up so that he can fight the new threats, the new machines, and go back to being the one. This film, it's so weird because it's not the worst reboot or the worst remake we've seen out of Hollywood in recent years. It's certainly a lot better than like The Rise of Skywalker. But when I say this film is literally like Star Wars The Force Awakens, but for the Matrix, that doesn't actually inspire the same level of excitement or joy that The Force Awakens did back in 2015, I believe it was. And the thing about The Force Awakens, everybody likes to rag on that movie now for just being nostalgia bait, not having that much of an original plot. But the thing is, that movie is very well made. That movie was made as a kind of statement to show that Disney can capture original Star Wars when they want to. And just because they absolutely failed after that doesn't mean that The Force Awakens isn't still a well made, entertaining, good movie. I still like it. And no matter where the rest of that sequel trilogy went, which I did not like very much. But The Matrix Resurrections just falls into that trap of it not only rehashes the plot of the first Matrix in a very major way. I mean, there was literally a trailer for the movie about deja vu and the fact that, deja vu is when you see the same thing again and it happens when the Matrix get changed. And this is basically a way for the movie to just continuously show things and plot points and literally clips from the original Matrix trilogy just throughout so that you can be reminded of how good those movies are. And it just doesn't do the movie any favors in terms of the fact that it's not very well made. The action scenes in this movie are probably the biggest letdown for me because I rewatched the Matrix trilogy very recently. In fact, I was fortunate enough to see the first Matrix in an IMAX because they just remastered it for IMAX, and I got to see not the second two, they didn't even remaster those, they remastered the first. And I watch The Matrix and enjoy it on an action level. I've never found although the philosophical stuff can be cool and the idea of The Matrix is very cool, for me, the structure and the DNA of that first Matrix movie is all about action. It's a classic action movie about somebody who is the one, doesn't know it, and doesn't have any abilities or powers at the start. And then they have to go through their training and their evolution, and there's a big awesome villain, Agent Smith, who's set up, who he has to fight by the end. It's a classic action movie structure. The fights in that movie are awesome, the kung fu, the bullet time. And this movie addresses those things. It talks about them with such reverence that you assume that it's going to deliver on them. But it never does. The hand to hand combat in this movie is just impressive, not non-existent, but there's very little of it. It's not choreographed very well, and it's not shot very well, and the gunfights are equally uninspiring. And so, just on that pure action movie baseline level, that even if the plot of this movie was garbage, even if the plot of this movie was just, as I say in my Force Awakens comparison, the same beat for beats as the Matrix original trilogy, but it had that well made aspect to it. It could have redeemed it, it could have saved it, and we could have just enjoyed a fourth Matrix movie with these characters. But you can't even enjoy it on that baseline action movie level. And it doesn't help that, look, Keanu Reeves, he's an amazing stunt person. Everybody loves Keanu. I'm not going to rag on Keanu, but his acting, it's not exactly like Daniel Day Lewis. I'll say it like that, where, he works as the character of Neo, but he really is just a lot's demanded of him in this role, even more so than was in the last two Matrix movies, where he was kind of very stoic and emotionless, and much less so than he was even in the first Matrix movie, where I thought he did a good enough job. In this movie, a lot is required of him, and he struggles compared to the other actors. The best part of this movie, and who I'm just gonna just stand and fanboy over constantly, is Jessica Henwick. She plays a character called Bugs, as in Bugs Bunny, and everything about her is just unbelievably iconic. Her look, her sunglasses, everything. Even people who hate this movie say that Jessica Henwick was good. She is a bright, shining star, so good in Iron Fist, the best part of that TV show, and just like she was the best part of that, she is the best part of The Matrix Resurrections. Apparently, she was meant to play Rey in the Star Wars sequel trilogy. I mean, she didn't get the highs of that in terms of her, career spotlight, but she didn't get the lows of it. And so hopefully after this movie, we can see her in more things. She's coming out in Knives Out 2, so that'll be fun. And yeah, Jessica Henwick, supremacy forever. Uh, in terms of the other supporting characters in this movie, I mean, I mentioned that I think Yahya Abdul Mateen II plays Morpheus. He doesn't play Lawrence Fishburne's version of Morpheus. He plays, I believe, a combination, as he says, of Morpheus and Agent Smith, two people who shaped and defined Neo as a character. And he's fine in the movie. He's serviceable. He's a charismatic actor, and he was perfectly good. Who I didn't think worked so well was Jonathan Groff as Agent Smith. I don't think it's his fault as an actor. He did a perfectly good job. I don't think I've seen him in many other things, but on a writing level, it was such a mistake to make him Agent Smith because Hugo Weaving is that character, and he has so many unique and iconic inflections and deliveries and lines and his whole mannerism. And Jonathan Groff, I mean, he wasn't trying to emulate him, so that worked out. But like, there's even that scene in the or that segment in the Matrix Revolutions where Agent Smith inhabits a crew member on the ship where Neo and Trinity are, and even that actor, although he's not Hugo Weaving, is delivering his lines with that intonation and pronunciation and speed and manner and vocabulary in a way that Jonathan Groff just doesn't. And I think he was a miscast for a villain like Smith. I don't think he sounds like him, looks like him, and he's not supposed to. But I just think that's a mistake. I just think it's a mistake to have him be Agent Smith. Either have him be a different agent, or have Hugo Weaving or an actor that acts like Agent Smith to be Agent Smith. And as I say, they kind of don't put the Matrix or the plot into any kind of new direction. They don't, to their credit, ruin the previous films or denigrate them or cheapen the sacrifices that Neo or Trinity made at the end of the Matrix Revolutions. They have all of that, and they respect it. And what those characters did bring peace. It did save the world, and it did save Zion and all the rest of it, and all of that worked out in this movie. But the fact that they just have to go through it again with another architect, played by Neil Patrick Harris, who I actually didn't think was bad. I thought he was pretty good in the movie. Is a whole different tone to the architect that there was in the original movies. But there you go. I will say that the threat was a bit more removed because in the first movie, or rather in Reloaded and Revolutions, you had this architect who was behind it all, and so he was very, knowledgeable, very in charge, and you felt like, he's behind everything that's been created. Whereas in this movie, Neil Patrick Harris refers to the suits as being in charge, as if this is like some Hollywood production, and like this movie is very fourth wall breaking, which I'll talk about in a second. But I'll say while his performance was pretty charismatic, it wasn't very intimidating, or I don't think lived up to the first architect in the Matrix Reloaded and Revolutions. Speaking of the fourth wall, this movie tries to be very clever and very witty, thinking that it's so cool that it's going to address the fact that it is an unnecessary corporate cash grab sequel demanded by the studio that Lana Wachowski herself probably didn't want to make, but that was going to be made with or without her cooperation. And so she must have thought, well, if anyone's going to make a Matrix movie, it's going to be me. And there's this whole thing at the beginning of the movie of the Matrix being a trilogy of video games that has existed in this world that Keanu Reeves made, and he's basing it off of memory, even though he doesn't know that he is. And you have like the game developers talking about what people love about the Matrix and what they could want to see in a Matrix 4. And it's just like it's not as clever or as original as it thinks it is. It's not the first movie to be like, this is a sequel. And the studio demanded it. I mean, we had like Deadpool, do those kind of fourth wall breaks, and plenty of there's plenty of other examples of this happening. And so, and just the fact that you recognize that this is a just a corporate cash in doesn't make it less demanding to make a movie that cuts against that. In fact, it kind of raises the bar for you to make something that proves the studio wrong, or at least justifies its own existence, which I didn't feel like this movie really did. Speaking of the video game thing, it's kind of weird how in this movie there's a scene where Jessica Henwick is pointing to the scene in the first Matrix that's just being played in live action of Morpheus showing, Neo the red pill and the blue pill for the first time, their first meeting. And she's like, that's a cutscene from your game. But it's just like literally live action. Apparently, the graphics in this game universe is just absolutely amazing. And it's like, I've played the Unreal Engine 5 Matrix demo on my Xbox, and like it looks really good, but it does not look like live action looks in this movie. Like it kind of would have been maybe cool to see it rendered as like a PS2 cutscene or something. The fact that they just play live action clips just for the benefit of the audience, um, or just for like nostalgia bait or member berries, just isn't. It just doesn't work. And as I say, if you're gonna remind people of better films, you better make a film that's as good as them, and not otherwise you're just reminding people of better fight scenes and better character interactions and better moments that they're not getting in this. And sadly, that is the case. There's not too much more to talk about in this movie. As I say, the only real positive that I took away from it was Jessica Henwick's performance, and that's pretty much it. I mean, it's not like Keanu Reeves isn't a dedicated action actor. There are one or two scenes, like I guess the car chase at the very end was kind of novel, but it's really not. And the movie does have some twists and turns, and does bring back some familiar characters, like Jada Pinkett Smith's character is Niobe is in the movie, and there's a whole section in the real world when Neo wakes up again, and there's a whole new human city, human colony, and you get to see how they're living, and you get to see the positive effects of what they did after the Matrix Revolutions. That was perfectly nice, but overall, the crew in this movie that's on the ship that Jessica Henwick is the captain of, none of them are memorable. None of them really stuck with me. Um, the climax of the movie is kind of funny, where you have Trinity. This is kind of a spoiler, but like it's such nonsense. It's such nonsense that like it's not even a spoiler. Where like Trinity being like transferred through Jessica Henwick through like a magnet version of Yahya Abdul Mateen II, and then like through like a straw through like a sewage pipe is just kind of it's kind of funny. But there's not really a lot positive I can say about the film. It doesn't need to exist. It wasn't cool. It wasn't clever. It didn't have good action in it. It didn't have good acting in it. And Carrie Ann Moss isn't a bad actress. She is good. And I will say the chemistry between her and Keanu Reeves was really genuine. You at least get the sense that the way that they feel about each other coming back to this world and living out this romance that they had for three films 20 years ago is kind of, being rekindled here, and they both really like being back. And that was really sweet. And that's probably, one of the only other things that I liked seeing in the movie, even though their romance in the original trilogy is one of the worst written, like Anakin and Padme level romances. It was kind of sweet in this movie to see like Keanu Reeves and Carrie-Anne Moss liking being reunited. Um, but it's not a good movie. It's not good, and it doesn't need to exist. It doesn't ruin the original trilogy, but it doesn't serve as a worthy sequel and doesn't justify its own existence. And I gave The Matrix Resurrections a 4 out of 10. So that's been it. Thank you very much for watching, and please stay tuned for the rest of my reviews coming out over the next couple of weeks, and I will see you guys in the next one.